Hello, everybody. Welcome to Everyday is Saturday. I'm Matt Stahl, along with my partner, Brad Gatto. And we have an exciting topic we're going to dig into today, something we haven't reviewed for a while. And I'm excited to share that with you. Before we get into that, Brad, what have you been up to?
Well, hello.
Hello.
How are you?
No, howdy.
Howdy.
Well,
every time I say howdy, who do you think I think of?
I don't know.
Woody.
Oh,
from Toy Story.
Yeah. I thought it was like a real person.
Howdy.
Knew. I was stumped.
That's my favorite Pixar movie of all time.
That's a good.
Is the original Toy Story. If you disagree with me, you're wrong.
I don't know. I'll put that much thought into it.
Really?
Yeah.
I love the movie. What have I been up to? Work. A lot of work, but it's been good. It's our busy season here. Kind of coming up on fourth quarter, end of the year. A lot of decisions need to be made before the clock strikes midnight on December 31st, and we all turn into pumpkins and can't do anything else about 2023. So busy there. And then at home, my house is being painted right now. So it's a little intrusive to have your house painted. A lot of plastic. Feels like we're living in the middle of a crime scene. But, it's all for, at least as my wife tells me, it's all going to end up really good. And you're going to be very happy.
It's all going to be worth it. It's all going to
be worth it. How about you?
Our house is also getting painted. So
we also both have vests on and denim. So,
very similar experience with that. It's been the kind of ongoing renovation since 2021, really.
Oh my.
So I'm excited for the finish line with that. We are wrapping up a sports season, and I just hosted a retreat up north, and the weather was not what I pictured, but it was beautiful and amazing.
Up north, where?
Bayfield, Wisconsin. Right on Lake Superior.
Bayfield, Wisconsin. If you're unfamiliar, Lake Superior is a tiny little lake in the northern part of Wisconsin.
Smallest one in the world.
Awesome. So what's our topic for today?
Our topic for today is why Fiat? And what I mean by that is it's been a long time since we've revisited this. Early on, we kind of talked about the history and how we found ourselves where we're at here. What I want to focus on today is why, if I'm someone choosing a financial advisory firm, why would I choose Fiat? So that's what we're going to focus on today.
Yeah, some of our episodes we do because we think it's a good episode. Sometimes we get really good ideas from other people, and we've gotten a lot of requests recently to do an episode on this very topic. So ask and you shall receive, the Why Fiat episode.
Yeah. So I like to, whenever we get into these types of subjects, kind of the who, what, where, when, and why, what we're going to start with is the who. So who does Fiat typically work with?
It's a very strong emphasis on the who.
Who?
We think commercials. Now that's what's stuck in my head. Gosh, I have bad ADD. The who for Fiat is, we work primarily, Matt, with people. I'll put an age on it because that tends to be a good way to measure things. 50 plus, 50 years old and older tends to be the crowd that we work with. And I would say I like to call our clients hard workers. Mm-hmm. We tend to work with people that worked hard.
What does that mean?
There's exceptions to that. That means that we're not a firm that works primarily with or specializes in generational wealth, where I came into money, there's just a trust planning, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. We tend to work with people that worked really hard their entire lives. They were very good savers and are nearing kind of the end of their working career, or they're already into retirement and trying to figure out, how to navigate this new phase of life. The analogy we like to use all the time is mountain climbing versus mountain descending. Mm-hmm. We don't typically work with people. We have exceptions to this, but we don't typically work with people on their way up the mountain, at least at the start of it, sometimes towards the end, right? They're about ready to summit, so to speak, and get to the top of the mountain. But again, more emphasis on the way down.
So what do you mean by summit?
That transition from your working years to your retirement years.
Okay. Yeah. However, you definitely do work with those that are still climbing the mountain.
We do. Okay. We do. It's just not, I wouldn't say we're bad at it or that we're necessarily any different than a lot of the firms out there as far as the way that we can provide services on planning around how much you should be saving, goal tracking, things of that nature, just overall asset management. But our specialty and our expertise is, now that you've saved the money, what do you do with it? Mm-hmm. I like to use the term or phrase, in your working years on the way up the mountain, so to speak, your primary goal is to take your income and turn it into an asset. Take the money that you've earned and turn it into assets that you've saved. In your mountain descent or in your spending years, your job is to take the assets that you've accumulated over your life and turn them back into an income paycheck for yourself. And there's just a lot of different complexities that go into that. And that's our specialty.
Okay. So that's transitioning into the what to a degree. Anything else on the who side? Any other characteristics or anything jump out of the who?
Not necessarily, other than, personality. I think this is one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they hire a financial advisor is they're hiring purely based on expertise and not expertise plus I actually like you. When you talk to people that like love their doctor, their primary care physician, or they love their CPA, to go kind of more in the realm of our world, or whatever it may be, any type of service or professional service that you hire out, some of it has to do with how good they are at the service you're paying them for. But a lot of it has to do with how much they just genuinely like that person.
Mm-hmm.
And then for whatever reason in our industry, my guess is it's probably true across the board, whether you're hiring somebody to do your gardening or be your doctor or be your financial advisor. I just don't think enough thought goes into that.
Mm-hmm.
And enough weight is put on that side of it. But so I guess I don't know if it's sheepishly, but I hesitate a little bit to add this in there, but it is just true. We work with people that we like and they like us.
So it's two ways.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's definitely two ways because it's that dance of we're trying to figure out who we can even help. And then they're trying to figure out if they even want our help. So I have to figure out if the numbers make sense, if I can even add any value, to your overall financial situation. And then you're trying to figure out if you even want that help and if you value from a numbers perspective what we can provide. But then there's always that component of, do we get along?
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to be able to serve you in the way that I should? There's a standard in our industry, the fiduciary standard, which is we're legally obligated as fiduciary advisors to do what's in the client's best interest. And I always kind of tell people that's half of the story. In order for me to do what's in your best interest, you have to allow me to do it. And part of that goes into that relationship. And do you trust me to be able to do that? And frankly, do we like each other enough that I'm always going to be looking out for you? That's a little bit of a diatribe on more non-quantifiable stuff, but
let's talk about the what. So you alluded to it a little bit. So as opposed to helping climb the mountain, helping on the descent, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So different setup. Now, most people aren't mountain climbers. Mm-hmm. So the analogy breaks down to a certain extent, but we've all at least walked up a hill and walked down a hill. And that walking up a hill uses a whole different set of muscles than it does to walk down a hill. And naturally, you would think it would be easier. And sometimes it is harder to actually go downhill than it is up. And a different set of challenges, different set of muscles, all sorts of things. And it's true in finance as well, that when you descend the mountain, the risks, the rewards, and all of that just look different. The analogy I like to use actually that lands, because again, most people aren't mountain climbers, is, have you ever climbed a tree in your entire life? Yes. At any point, have you ever attempted to climb a tree?
Yes.
Most people have, right? Matt, when you were climbing the tree, did you plan your descent before you started up the tree?
I think you know the answer to that question already.
There's no rhetorical questions on a podcast, Matt. The answer is no, we never do. You just climb, you have fun, and you get to the top and you kind of look down and you're like, well, shoot, look what I got myself into. Mm-hmm. And the scariest part of climbing a tree isn't going up, it's coming down. And actually, there's a lot more treachery on the way down. And so we focus in on that area of life, taking those assets, turning it back into an income. That income could be for you in your own personal life, but that could also be for whoever your beneficiaries are, or where your estate's going to end up. But at the end of the day, all that money that you've saved and the assets that you've accumulated, physical, investable, or otherwise, have to end up somewhere. And planning around that is just a different set of facts than is on the way up the mountain.
So
your savings years.
Sounds like distribution planning. So helping with that side of things. And when you start distributing from those assets.
Yeah.
Does that sound accurate?
Yeah. One of the primary things is figuring out how to spend it. and do it in a way that you're comfortable with it. Do it in a way that you're not going to run out of it. Do it in a way that we're trying to avoid the risks that go into that, whether that's your longevity risk and try to figure out, how long you're going to live and what that may look like. That could be economic risks or market-based risks and, your accounts going up and down while we're in distribution mode. It could be congressional risks and the tax bills associated with your income in retirement. It could be a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one thing jumped out there when you talk about the tax piece of it and realizing that as you focus on that backside of the mountain and the distribution planning, how big of a piece the tax planning is of that.
Yeah. Well, the two largest the two largest expenses, and you could probably say risks for retirees, are healthcare and taxes. And so one of the most commonly missed things that I see in financial planning for people nearing or in retirement is there's not a lot of planning or no planning given towards the tax liability associated with your retirement income. And that retirement income, Matt, could be the obvious things of your Social Security, which everybody gets to participate in, assuming that you worked, and earned an income for any significant length of time. A pension at your job, or it could be just you spending the assets you saved, which could be brokerage account type assets, 401ks, 403bs, IRAs, things like that. And having all of that come into your life to give you a paycheck, what does the tax bill look like? And I think what a lot of people probably don't internalize, Matt, is that in your working years, there's a lot of systems in place to help you figure out roughly what you're going to owe. Kind of like some checks and balances. So when you get a brand new job and you have to fill out a form that says how many exemptions do you want to have or file for. And that's just the way for your employer to try or attempt to withhold the correct amount of taxes out of every one of your paychecks as you go throughout the year. Now, it's a bit of a guess, which is why sometimes when you get to the end of the year, you either owe money or get money back because you guessed incorrectly. But at least it's an educated guess, right?
Yep.
And so the system, we all kind of get used to it. Like I pay taxes as I go and I get these checks every 2 weeks or once a month or how often it is that you get paid. And there's a highly educated guess that's going into paying the tax bill as you go with the true upcoming year end. In retirement, it doesn't work that way. It's up to you to figure that kind of stuff out. And it gets more complicated because you've got all these different income streams coming in. And so something as simple as year over year, Matt, planning appropriately so that we know what the tax bill might look like and having that, again, that educated guess so we don't have any surprises. That's the more simple side of it. Then there's the more macro side of it, which is your overall lifetime tax liability and what you're going to do with that.
Perfect. All right. So you also alluded to this a little bit when we were just talking, but the why piece of this. So at what point did you realize this was super an important thing that perhaps people weren't thinking through?
When we started working with this age group, primarily, we all have segments of the population, right? This is baby boomers primarily. And is it Gen X that's right below them? Am I getting that right?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. So it's primarily those two generations that we're talking about here. When I started trying to figure out some of the tax piece of it, because what I realized was, in our industry, Matt, unfortunately, you and I aren't really trained on this stuff. Like the average advisor is not trained on taxes. In fact, it's the opposite, where we're told if you work for a lot of firms that you can't give any sort of tax advice. But I knew it was a need. So we start trying to educate ourselves. Well, then the more you look into it, the more you realize that this generation, the people nearing or entering retirement now, are doing something that no generation has ever done, period, ever. Like nobody before this generation has tried to retire on their own dime. Now, I'm painting with a broad brush. There's still pensions out there that exist, but they're far less common. But when you think about, Matt, the average person wants to retire in their late 50s, early to mid 60s, maybe as late as 70. But then they're also going to live until they're, again, using averages, late 80s, early mid 90s. So you could be retired and living off of the money that you've saved for 20 to 30 years. Well, their parents, so the boomers' parents, which some of them are still alive, but of course they're in their late 80s, early to mid 90s, or already passed away. They didn't do this. And I know they didn't do it for the simple fact that when you start studying taxes and tax law, IRAs and 401ks, which are the primary place people have saved their money, didn't even exist until 1974 and 1978, respectively. Well, the boomers' parents started working before that. And so at least the first half of their career, they weren't saving to those accounts. And I know they weren't because they didn't exist. And their parents, so the boomers' grandparents, the World War I generation, they didn't retire. Again, painting with a broad brush, but they worked and died. Like there was no like idea of, one, I'm going to retire at 65 and then I'm not going to work for 20 years. One, because they didn't live on average till 85, 90 years old back then, part of it. But the other part of it was our economy just wasn't set up for it. You just kind of worked until you died. And so this is a kind of a new phenomenon. And it's a phenomenon that I feel like our industry has failed the average consumer on, because our industry wasn't really ready for it either. This idea of these IRAs and 401ks coming out and people thinking, well, this is really great. I get to put all this money away and I don't have to pay the tax bill right now. I can defer that till later. Under the thought process that when I get to retirement, I'll spend less money, which means my tax bill will be less and it's not going to be any sort of problem. Well, you fast forward to today. Now that first generation that's ever started and ended their working years with IRAs and 401ks has played out this whole scenario. Then they get to retirement. And on the whole, Matt, what we started finding was when we started specializing in this years ago was people's tax bills weren't going down. In a lot of cases, they were going up. And so they're sitting on all this, pre-tax money and trying to figure out how to distribute it back to themselves in a meaningful way. And it brought a whole new set of issues or complexities that frankly, my industry didn't see coming. And it's added a lot of complexity to retirement these days. And so we've really it's a long answer to your question, but it's why we spend so much time, energy, and effort trying to educate just the general public, but specifically our clients on this idea that this tax planning is so important.
Well said. So we covered the who, we covered the what and the why. I don't think we need to cover the where and the when.
Well, where is with Fiat and the when is now.
There you go.
If that's not a sales pitch, I don't know what is.
The when is always.
Let me summarize a little bit there and say this. Most people on the way up the mountain didn't necessarily do anything wrong. Saving money is always better than not saving money. And so looking at the pile of money that you saved and then being kind of like, shucks, I should have saved it somewhere else. Is it possible that that's true? Sure. Right? That's always possible.
Probably likely.
It could be the investment choice you made, like would have been better in ABC stock versus XYZ that I invested in. You could have that regret with hindsight. You could have the regret of I should have paid more of my tax bill earlier in life and not left so much of it to myself in retirement. That could be true. But the most important part to success or failure of being able to retire is just saving, period. Right? So I don't want people to feel bad, number one. And number two, I said this a little, I kind of alluded to this, but I just want to drive the point home. My industry is the one that told you to do this.
Right.
We're the financial advising industry is the one that was like, no, don't pay the tax bill now. It will benefit you later in life if you don't pay the bill now and you kick that can down the line. And what we're finding out now with the first ever generation to walk into retirement, again, having to do their own lifting through IRAs and 401ks primarily, is that on the whole, for a lot of the families that we serve, that not only did their bill not go down, but the complexities of trying to keep the bill as low as possible are just exponential.
And it's unpredictable, right?
And it's unpredictable because who knows what Congress is going to do,
right?
But they're pretty consistent, though. They don't change very much, right?
Consistent, predictable, all the above.
Yes, that's how I think that's how most of our listeners would probably define Congress. Consistent and predictable.
All right. I think that's a good summary of why wealth management.
Yeah. At the end of the day, Matt, financial planning is different than asset management. And that's the distinction I want to make is It doesn't matter if you're a mountain climber or you're a mountain descender. If you're in your working years and going up the mountain and you're a saver primarily, or you're on your way down the mountain in your retirement years and you're trying to figure out how to spend the money that you have, asset management is part of the story. In retirement, asset distribution, income planning, tax planning, estate and legacy planning, all of that has to be part of the puzzle, so to speak, to make things as efficient as possible. And so we've just taken that more broad, comprehensive approach to kind of that phase of life and to the families that we serve.
Yep, love it.
That said, in order to get a hold of us, if this sounds at all interesting to you, or you have an existing relationship where this is just not the type of planning that you're getting, again, I'm not saying asset management is bad. It's wonderful. But if you also have a need for this distribution type planning, this is exactly what we do. We also offer complimentary consultations to talk through how we might be able to help you dive into your situation at a high level, just to figure out if there's anything we can do as far as providing value to your family. We don't charge for that part of the process. And so if you're at all interested or kind of want to kick the tires to figure out if there's different things you could or should be doing in retirement, just let us know. We'd love to try to help. You can get a hold of us and find all of our contact information on our website. It's www.fiatwm.com. That's FIATWM.com. Not only is our contact information there, but a bunch more education. One of the passions of Fiat is education. In fact, I would argue it's probably our primary passion, isn't just educating the families that we get to serve, but also just the general public on all things distribution planning or kind of that descent down that mountain. And so if you're looking for further education, there's a bunch of free education resources on our website that you can find as well. With that being said, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Every Day is Saturday. Again, if you like this type of education, we'd ask that you subscribe to our podcast. You can do that in the link below. Share it with your friends. Do as many as you want. You can share it with like 100 friends. We wouldn't even care. We would love it. So thanks for joining us for this episode, Matt. Always fun. And we will see all of you next Saturday. Bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Every Day is Saturday. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Fiat Wealth Management. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.